I was just trying to be nice. But she made it very clear she wanted more. I never meant for it to be anything. Honestly, it was just coffee. The kind you order without thinking, the same place, the same time of day, because habits keep you from noticing how empty your life feels. I'd been coming to this corner cafe for weeks, half because it was on the way to class, half because the noise inside kept me from realizing how quiet my apartment was. She was there first most mornings. Always at the table by the window, the one with the chip tile underneath that made the chair wobble if you weren't careful. She seemed to know how to balance it with just the weight of her legs, never adjusting, just fitting herself into the imperfection like it was natural. The first time she looked up at me, it wasn't some movie moment. Just a glance over her glasses, like she was checking if I was going to take too long in line. But she remembered me, noticed me. A week later, she spoke. "You always order the same thing." Her voice was low, steady. The kind of voice that made you answer even if you weren't sure you had anything worth saying. "Yeah," I said, shrugging, suddenly aware of how tight my hands felt around the strap of my bag. "Guess I'm predictable." She smiled, small, like it wasn't meant to be caught. Nothing wrong with that. I didn't ask her name right then. Didn't need to. She seemed older than most people who came in. Not in a way that felt distant, but in the way she carried herself, calm, unhurried. Like she wasn't racing the clock the way the rest of us were. After that, it became, I don't know, something. A pattern layered onto my routine. She'd be there, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring at the street. If she caught me looking, she'd tilt her head, like she was trying to decide whether to say something or let the silence stretch. I started waiting for those silences. Once, I made a comment about the weather. Stupid, really, just filler words as I grabbed a lid for my coffee. She laughed. Not loud, but enough that I felt it. "You sound like my neighbor," she said. "He gives me a forecast every time we cross paths. Yesterday, he told me the rain was good for the roses." I don't know why I remembered that, but the next day, I found myself looking at the sky before I walked in, trying to come up with something less obvious to say. And yet, I never told her much. I didn't mention the half-written text sitting unsent on my phone, the kind where I started to reach out to old friends, then stopped because I didn't know what I wanted from them. I didn't tell her that some nights I fell asleep with the TV on just so the room wouldn't feel so hollow. She wouldn't have asked. She didn't need to. One morning, the barista called my name, and before I could reach the counter, she was already there, sliding the cup toward me. "Thought I'd save you the trip," she said. Her hand brushed mine as I took it. No rush to move away, just the smallest pause. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just kind. That was all. But later that afternoon, when I got home and set my phone down on the counter, I noticed a new message light up the screen. Unknown number. "You don't have to sit alone tomorrow. Join me." I stared at it longer than I should have. Not sure if I was supposed to feel lucky or scared of how quickly a routine can become something else. Either way, I didn't delete it, and that was the beginning. The next morning, I sat across from her for the first time. She'd waved me over, like it was the easiest thing in the world, and suddenly the space between our tables felt like it had never existed. Her book was open but face down, and I remember thinking that meant she'd already decided she wasn't going to finish the page. We didn't talk much at first. Just the kind of silence that's supposed to be uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. She pushed the extra mug across the table. "Too hot," she said. "I thought you'd help me finish it before it goes cold." It was chamomile. Not what I usually drank, but I pretended to care about the steam curling against my face, mostly because she was watching me over the rim of her own cup. After a while, she asked, "You live close by?" "Couple blocks," I said. "Upstairs, above the hardware store." She smiled at that, like it told her more than I realized. "I know the place. I used to rent the back apartment when I first moved here. Drafty in the winter. I wanted to ask more, but she cut herself off, pressing her finger against the lip of her mug. A soft circle over and over, like the thought had carried her somewhere she didn't want to explain. Instead, she said, "I'm divorced. Been a while now." I didn't know why she told me that, only that my chest tightened, the way it does when you're not sure if someone just opened a door for you or closed it. "Sorry," I murmured. She waved it away. "Don't be. It's quieter, that's all." I thought about my own apartment then, the silence broken by the hum of the fridge, my habit of letting the kettle whistle longer than necessary just to fill the space. I almost told her, but the words snagged in my throat. The age thing, our gap, hung there without either of us naming it. She must have seen it in my hesitation, because her expression shifted, just slightly, softer but guarded. "You're young," she said, not accusing, more like stating the fact for herself. I shrugged, trying to make light of it. "Depends on the day. Some mornings I feel about 80. She laughed, low, genuine. Felt like a reward. But later, walking home, I caught myself picturing her kitchen, the way she might stand at the counter with the light from the window on her shoulders. The thought hit me harder than I expected, and I shook it off like I'd brushed against something dangerous. That night, I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over her message from yesterday. I almost typed back something casual, but nothing came out right. Everything either sounded too much or not enough. The next morning, when I slid into the cafe again, she looked up before I could even order. Her hand rested briefly on the seat across from her, the smallest invitation. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It didn't take long before I started timing my mornings around hers. I'd slow my walk, glance through the window before opening the door, checking if she was there. And if she wasn't, the whole room felt hollow, like the chairs and chatter weren't arranged the way they should be. One Thursday, she wasn't at her table. I sat alone, coffee cooling too fast. Halfway through, she came in, flushed from the cold, hair damp from rain. She looked surprised to see me already there. "You're early," she said, shrugging off her coat. I smiled too quickly. "Couldn't sleep." She slid into the chair across from me, her eyes scanning me a little longer than usual. Then she looked away, fiddling with the strap of her bag. "Maybe I shouldn't," she started, then stopped. "Shouldn't what?" "Never mind." She shook her head, but the words stayed between us, like smoke. For the first time, silence didn't feel safe. We sat there anyway, letting it stretch. She sipped her coffee, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but my throat tightened around the words. Just as I worked up the nerve, someone called her name. A man, gray-haired in a worn jacket. He stopped at our table, smiling too easily. "Didn't expect to see you here." She straightened, the calm in her body hardening. "Morning, Mark." He glanced at me, quick and assessing. "Friend of yours." Her pause was longer than it should have been. "Just someone I see here." The words stung more than I thought they would. Just someone. When he left, she exhaled, slow. I tried to play it off. "Old friend." Something like that. She rubbed her temple. "He's part of another life." I nodded, but the space between us felt wider now, like I'd been pushed to the edges of her world without warning. The next few minutes we barely spoke. She traced the rim of her mug. I folded the napkin into smaller and smaller squares. When I finally looked up, she was watching me. "You don't say much," she said softly. I shrugged. "Maybe I don't know what's safe to say." Her eyes lingered, searching. Then she reached across the table, like she might take the napkin from my hands. But she stopped halfway, fingers curling back toward her. The gesture was nothing, barely movement, yet it left my chest tight, as if we'd leaned too close to something neither of us could undo. "I should go," she murmured, standing. I stood too, almost out of instinct. For a moment we faced each other, too close for strangers, not close enough for anything else. Her breath hitched, or maybe I imagined it. I thought she might lean in, thought I might. But then she stepped back, brushing her coat sleeve as if erasing the possibility. "See you," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. And just like that, the moment dissolved. But I carried it with me the whole way home, the weight of what almost happened, heavier than what did. It happened on a Sunday. The cafe was closed, and for the first time our pattern was broken. She'd texted me, just one line, "Walking by the river if you need air." I told myself it was nothing, but my feet carried me anyway. She was there on a bench, coat collar turned up, hair loose against the wind. I sat beside her, the cold wood biting through my jeans. For a while we just watched the water slip by, neither of us speaking. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly, eyes on the current. "Leaving where?" "This town. This version of yourself. Just starting over." The question landed harder than I expected. I thought about it, sure. Packing up, disappearing into a city where no one knew me. But saying it out loud felt like admitting how restless I really was. "Sometimes," I said, my hands tightened in my pockets. "But I don't know what I'd be running toward, or from." She nodded like she understood too well. Then she laughed, short and dry. "I'm twice your age, and I still ask myself that." Her voice cracked just enough to slip under my skin. I wanted to reach for her hand, but instead I bent forward, elbows on my knees. "You don't seem like you're running," I said. "That's the trick." She turned toward me then, her eyes sharp, almost accusing. "I sit here with you, and I wonder if I'm fooling myself, pretending this isn't dangerous." The word dangerous hung between us. I forced a laugh, though it came out thin. "It's just coffee. Just walking." Her gaze lingered, steady, like she could see the lie forming even as I spoke it. "You make it sound simple," she whispered. I didn't answer. My chest felt tight, words pressing but refusing to form. Instead, I watched her fingers tighten on the bench, the knuckles pale. She was holding something back, same as me. "I don't want to hurt you," she said finally, almost under her breath. The honesty of it struck me harder than anything else she'd ever said. My throat dried. "You couldn't," I managed. She shook her head, a small, weary smile. "You don't know that." I turned toward her, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way the wind lifted a strand of her hair against her cheek. My hand twitched, aching to tuck it behind her ear, to bridge the tiny space that had been growing smaller every day. She didn't move, didn't flinch, only watched me, waiting. The silence stretched so long it felt like an answer in itself. And then her lips parted, as if she might speak, or maybe breathe something she couldn't take back. I leaned in a fraction, not enough to close the distance, just enough to feel the pull. Her eyes didn't leave mine, and the question hung there, louder than anything either of us could say. Were we about to cross the line, or step back forever? She wasn't at the cafe on Monday, or Tuesday. By Wednesday, I pretended I didn't care. Sat at my usual table, scrolled aimlessly, let the coffee go cold. But the empty chair across from me wouldn't let me forget. When she finally showed up, it wasn't the same. She nodded hello but didn't invite me over. She sat at the window again, the wobbling chair, like we'd rewound to the very first time. I tried to catch her eye. She didn't look up. Eventually, I gathered my things and walked past her table. "Hey," I said soft. She smiled politely, polite, that was the difference. "Hey," and that was it. I wanted to ask what had changed. I wanted to sit down anyway, force the silence open. But her book was upright this time, a clear wall. I left. That night, I almost texted. I typed, "Did I do something?" Then deleted it. Tried again with "Wanna meet tomorrow?" But couldn't press send. The blinking cursor felt heavier than any answer she might give. Thursday, I didn't go. Neither Friday. I told myself I was busy, but really I was waiting to see if I mattered enough for her to notice. On Saturday, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. "Sorry I disappeared. My daughter's in town." Didn't want to confuse things. I read the message 3 times. Daughter. The word shifted everything. I hadn't pictured her as someone's mother, though of course it made sense. She had a whole history I hadn't touched. Whole rooms of her life I'd never been invited into. I typed back, "I understand," but didn't send it. What would it even mean? Understand what? That I wasn't part of her real world. That she could set me aside when necessary? The weekend stretched long. I wandered the aisles of the grocery store just to kill time. Bought things I didn't need. The cashier asked if I wanted a bag, and I almost said her name instead. By Monday, I couldn't stand it. I walked past the café, just once, pretending I was headed somewhere else. Through the glass, I saw her, alone again, stirring her tea. The chair across from her was empty. I stopped outside, hand hovering near the door handle. My reflection in the glass looked younger than I felt, small against the backdrop of her stillness inside. For a moment, I imagined opening the door, sitting down, asking her why she'd pulled back. I imagined her telling me it didn't matter, or maybe that it did. But I didn't move. I just stood there until someone brushed past, going inside, breaking the spell. I turned away, walking fast, like distance could undo the pause between us. And the strangest part was, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Do you want part 6 to lean toward a recoil and clarity beat? She makes the impossibility more explicit, or a lingering nearness beat. They find themselves together again despite the gap. You said, white heavy checkmark prompt 6. The climax, emotional resolution, 500 words. Writing prompt. Deliver the emotional climax, not loud, but powerful. Instructions. A choice must be made. To speak or stay silent, to risk or retreat. Let the moment happen in an intimate setting. Kitchen, doorstep, park bench. Show the emotional cost of vulnerability. The tension is in what might be lost. Allow characters to finally say what they've been suppressing, but still keep it quiet. End with a simple human connection. A smile, a touch or soft okay. Tone reminder. Avoid romantic cliches. The power is in what's real, not what's poetic. ChatGPT said, here's part 6. The climax, emotional resolution, 500 words. Male POV, quiet but powerful. It was raining the night I saw her again. Not at the cafe, but at her front porch. I hadn't planned to be there. I was walking home from class, hood pulled tight, when I caught sight of her light through the curtains. Something made me stop. She opened the door before I could knock, like she'd heard me pause outside. You're soaked, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes lingered too long, scanning me the way people do when they're deciding whether to let you in or let you go. I was just passing by, I muttered. My hands wouldn't stay still. I shoved them in my pockets, pulled them out again. Didn't mean to. Come in, she said, cutting me off. Her kitchen was warm, the faint smell of tea still in the air. I sat at the counter while she filled the kettle, both of us too aware of the small space between us. Finally, I said, you pulled back. She didn't turn around, just rested her hands on the counter. I had to. Because of your daughter? She nodded, then shook her head, then sighed. Because of everything. Because you're 20-something and I'm not. Because people talk. Because it's easier to pretend. The words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because they were the things I hadn't let myself say out loud. I wasn't pretending, I said quietly. That made her turn. Her eyes were tired, but steady. I know. For a long moment we just looked at each other. Rain tapping at the window, kettle beginning to hum. All the pauses, all the silences of the last weeks, gathered into that single point. I thought maybe you didn't want me around, I admitted. My voice cracked, not from volume but from restraint. Thought maybe I'd made it up. The looks, the way you laughed. She crossed the room, slow. Stopped at the counter opposite me. Close enough I could see the faint scar on her wrist, the chipped nail polish. You didn't make it up, she whispered. The kettle whistled. Neither of us moved to shut it off. I don't know what to do with it, I confessed. With this. Her hand moved, just slightly, resting on the counter between us. Not touching mine, not quite. Neither do I. The whistle grew louder. Finally she reached over, turned off the stove, silence crashing down in its place. I thought she might step back then, close it off again. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me in that way she always had, searching, steady, as though waiting for me to say what she already knew. I don't want to stop, I said. Her eyes softened, almost breaking. A pause. Then, quietly, okay. It wasn't a promise. Wasn't a declaration. Just one small word. But in that kitchen, with rain dripping down my sleeves, it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden decision, no line crossed in the rain. Just small shifts, steady and quiet. I stopped sitting alone at the café. She didn't make me ask. Her hand would rest on the chair across from her as I walked in, the same way she had that morning weeks ago. The barista started rolling her eyes at us, calling out both our orders together. Black coffee, chamomile tea. As if it had been that way forever. Some mornings we still said almost nothing. She'd read, I'd scroll through notes for class. Other mornings, she'd tell me about her daughter. Grown, independent, living 3 states away. I'd tell her about the professor who wrote in the margins of my paper like he was editing a novel. It wasn't dramatic, just ordinary. The kind of ordinary I didn't know I'd been missing. One Saturday we walked by the river again. The same bench. The same restless water. She sat close enough this time that her shoulder brushed mine. Neither of us pulled away. Feels different now, I said. She smiled, eyes on the current. That's because we stopped pretending. The wind tugged at her hair, and without thinking, I reached up to tuck it back. My hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. She let it. Evenings, sometimes I'd find myself in her kitchen. She always brewed tea too hot. Let it cool until it reached that perfect temperature she liked. I still burned my tongue, rushing. She teased me about it, but her smile always softened after. There were moments when guilt flickered in me still. About the gap between us, about the rules people don't write down but expect you to follow. But those moments passed quicker now, replaced by something steadier. Not certainty exactly, but trust. One morning, at 8:47 sharp, I caught myself watching her instead of the clock. She noticed, raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, I said, grinning into my coffee. Just trying to remember this. She tilted her head, curious, but didn't press. That was one of the things I loved most. She didn't force answers out of me. She just gave me space to find them. I never did make a big confession. She never asked for one. What we had was built in pauses, in half smiles across chipped tables, in hands brushing when passing a mug. Real love, if that's what it was, didn't need fireworks. It needed presence. And I think that's why it lasted. Now, when I look back, the story doesn't feel like it began with a text or a glance. It feels like it began with something simpler, The moment I realized she'd seen me, really seen me, and every day after, she kept seeing me. That's what mattered. That's what stayed. What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?